Hello and welcome to episode number 12 of building a 2D game in Flutter, which will be multiplayer, building it from scratch. Right here, you can see I have a playlist on YouTube. It goes up to episode 10 so far. Episode 11 is stuck in Twitch. So Twitch somehow thinks I'm still broadcasting that episode, therefore I can't download the video, nor can I somehow export it. Also, if I watch it, it has no sound. So I'm waiting for that to get resolved. Otherwise, I'll have to probably do a summary of what we did in episode 11, in the worst case. Again, as I mentioned earlier, we were featured on Reddit. I added a comment on the bottom here. I'm going to post that into the chat, that link. I added like a summary of things there. One is the full playlist, and then we actually now we're gonna get there. I'm reaching ahead here, but basically I fixed the problem that we had earlier, where it wouldn't run on the phone. I will explain what happened there. So yesterday I actually created a release. So we have releases tab here, and we have a release. The super alpha version, which allows you to download the Mac version and also the phone version. So there are 3 different APKs here. The ARM ones worked for me. You have to figure out whichever is best for you. And then the app.zip, that's the macOS app. So you can actually try this now. So people can actually download the app and play with it while we're building it. And every time we have, we make some achievement, we will post more. Of that. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to launch the app. Let me just have some shortcuts here of Nexus to launch on this phone. So as I said, we've fixed the problem with the app crashing. So we're going to launch STR copy. Now you're actually going to see the screen of my phone, and you can see now I'm actually using my fingers down here to control this on this phone that I have, and I can basically fly around here, and now I flew out of the game. Obviously that's not cool, so we can do a restart. Here we should be able to do restart. Well, if we go over here, hot restart, we should come back to where we were. Okay, the other cool thing about this is that I can also control this here. So basically, even the keyboard input works. So this STR copy app is quite awesome. So we can basically play around, even if it's running on my phone, we can play around here on the computer directly. I don't have to keep touching my phone, which is kind of nice. So again, as always, we will have an hour roughly until about, like, right now it's 7 over here. So roughly about 8, 5 till 8, and then we'll have a 5-minute break, and then we'll continue until another hour. Okay, so this is what I wanted to show for now. I'm going to go into the bug that I had and how I fixed it. What I want to do today, though, after that, is, as you can see, we just happened to fly out of our game, which wasn't cool. So what we'll implement first is a simple follow with a camera. And then what I want to do, I want to put a HUD up here that gives us information about the player health. So we actually are not even affecting the player health yet, but obviously if we hit a wall and later if someone shoots us, we want to decrease the health, right, of the player, and we want to then show that. Also, I will most likely, once we actually are able to shoot, I don't want to have unlimited ammo. I actually want it to be where you have a certain amount of ammo, and if you shoot, that kind of decreases, and maybe you can collect little pickups to increase your ammo again. So that's for that. So what I'll do first is I'll explain a little bit what our problem was, and actually that the problem came from actual Flame. So if we look at the code there that we ran, so basically the problem was that I was in the game that I already had implemented in that version. I was actually let's actually just open that version instead. So that version here, I was loading all images up front, and so here now you can still see this comment actually reproduce the problem by just commenting out one image. So and and I didn't find that immediately. I found that after trying all kinds of other things, after debugging through this, and basically what's happening is, so Flame has this images static class here that allows us to basically load images and then they are cached at the same time. So if you look closer at this method, right, load, what it does, it says, okay, I'm going to look at the loaded files, right, which is basically our cache. And if it has the file name we're trying to load, well, then we'll just return it, right? We'll jump down here. But if it doesn't, we'll kick off the loading, right? But the fetch memory here, that's running asynchronously. So what was happening is, for instance, for our, I'm going to actually move the move this one over here so I can show this. So basically what was happening is, whenever, right, this whole thing is one image, but whenever we try to load that for rendering, one of these floor tiles, it would then come in here again. It's like, oh, well, I didn't load it yet. It's not part of the loaded files yet. So I'm actually going to load it again. And so it kept reloading and reloading until finally they were somehow loaded and were in the cache. And that's what we saw in the browser as well, right? We blamed, or at least I did, Flutter not being 100% web ready yet, which is kind of true. But in that case, actually, it was reloading these images over and over because of this bug. On macOS, we didn't see much of an effect, but on the phone, actually, it caused to crash things, right? So that one I fixed. And basically, the way I fixed it is I just say, well, it's probably better to preload all the images anyways. So if you look to the main file here, we're now preloading all the images. Before, I only had one. And it was a string, and then I'm getting the path now from the assets, which makes sense, so I don't repeat myself. Now the load basically it's a load all. There's no load all. There's only one load method now, and basically when you then get an image right here, that's when it says, well, you need to load this before. So when we inside the game, once the game is running, we're trying to get an image. It's all synchronous now, and we're assuming that the loaded already has that image, right? So we make sure that if we forget to load one and we're trying to get it, we don't try to load it right then and there. We just fail. Makes things a lot easier, and we don't have that much images that we are not. Right? If you had the game that had like thousands and thousands of assets and you only use them in certain scenarios, you don't want to load them all in memory. But we basically, at this point, use pretty much all the images, all the assets that we have, right? Okay, so the next thing we'll do, we will start implementing something. So as I said, we have the problem that basically, I'm going to move this over here so we can keep seeing our screen. So right now, for instance, right, we lost our player, right? Let me it's like small like this. And actually, we're going to also restart it from the IDE. So I just had to start it here, but we're going to quit this and restart it from here. So I'm just going to keep developing on the Nexus for now that I have here. Later on, we might jump back to the Mac version, but since now finally it's working on the phone, we kind of want to enjoy that. So right now, basically, what's happening, if I move my player forward, right, it just starts flying, and like the camera is not following. If we somehow go outside of the screen, right, we lose our player. Obviously, not a good idea. So what we'll do, we have to basically, in the game loop, right, we have to figure out how to make sure that the camera kind of follows the player. So here we have the game. And so whenever we update, right, once we know what the player will be, we have to say something like follow camera, right, or camera follow. So let's make a method here, void camera follow. Okay. And so what we'll do, we do our updates, and so what we'll do, we give it a world position, or we might as well give it an offset. So the center, I'll just give it a world position. It's okay. Leave it offset. We'll see. There's so many ways where we can convert this, but basically now what we'll do, once we know what the player is, we can say camera follow, and we give it the game.player. The world position, to right from the tile position, and then to offset, and that's kind of long. That's why I wasn't sure where we're going to do this, but this looks fine. And so now we have this camera follow, and then all we're going to do is like we're just basically going to move the camera to where the player is, right? So sorry, the canvas. So what that means is we're going to have to give it the canvas, obviously. Okay, yes, but we do that when we render, right? So what we want to do is we want to. Well, actually, you know what? It doesn't make much sense to even store this anywhere. We will have access to the player model, right? So there's no reason to copy the camera. Well, actually, let's do that. Let's still do it anyways. So we'll do we'll have a offset, and that's going to be our camera, right? And then if we go back here, well, we don't want to go back there. We want to just go down to where we had camera follow, and we just say that the camera is dead center, basically, for now. And now when we render, so we do all these things. We move the camera lower left and all these things. And then we do the render, and you know that while we're rendering, we're actually also moving the cameras around the origin. But now at the very end, right, we will basically move the camera, the cameras to where the camera wants to be. So we're going to translate, or we're going to let's see if we can just do that. Oh, it wants two things, right? Okay, it wants dx. Okay, let's see if that just works. It's kind of a very simple approach. Let's see. And okay, so we are here. Now if we move the player, okay, I don't know if this actually refreshed. Syncing faster nexus. We might have to restart. Okay. Yeah, so we're basically not following it all. What we may have to do, we actually have to may have to do this beforehand, before we draw everything, which kind of makes sense. So let's try that. So you see already we are paying a little bit of price. So okay, now we can see that canvas move, right? Not exactly where we wanted it to move. And like the screener is actually slowing down. So I'm already, yeah, the screener is kind of behind. So we kind of see like this is not working exactly like we want, but we're moving the cameras around somehow, right? So again, since I already figured this out once, I'm going to cheat a little bit, and I'm going to see what we'll have to do. Okay, so first of all, it has to be negative. So let's start with the player update actually. And you know what I'm going to do is, you see that this is really well. Okay, let's see. Let's keep trying this with the phone. And I'm going to turn on the light a little bit. It's getting dark. So I hope that's better, so you can see me a little bit. Now, by the way, if you have any question, hola, Julian, thanks for joining. Yeah, and if you have any questions or you just want to say hi, the chat is open for everyone, right? And sometimes I see these a little bit late because I have to look over to this monitor over here, but I will always try to take your suggestions or comments into account. Okay, so what we want to do, so we want to take so let's just actually what we want to do is this might be a little more complicated. So actually what we want to do, we give the world position of the player. Let's just start this from the beginning. Okay, and so now what we want to do is so the thing is, we need to somehow we want to center the player, right? So actually what we need to do is we need to know what the what the size is of our game. And I think we already have that. So I hope the size that we are passing in here. Yeah, so we are storing the size of our game, right? So what we need to do is actually, we need to say the position that we're trying to get is basically the offset of the player, right? And then minus, okay, so now basically we're missing certain things that Flame gave us. So I have a minus here because I was using the position that Flame gave us. But basically what we're doing, we are translating the position, right? Translate. And then we basically want to center it, right? So we're saying that we take the size width, divide by 2, and then the size height, also divide by 2. All right, so that gives us the position where we want the camera to be. Because we don't want to just like because otherwise the player will have it somewhere in the lower left. We don't want that. We want the player to be in the center. And then for now, basically, yeah. So for now, we're just going to set the camera to that, right, to this position. And later on, we'll add some niceties to that. And then, as I said, we want to translate the camera before, but we have to do minus because our origin is on the bottom left. So we want to translate, move things up and down. We want to move things basically to there and to there. Sorry, to there, right? We want to kind of, this guy is on the lower left. We actually want it, right? But we'll see in a second. And we may think about this a little closer. Okay, there's a bug in my code. Okay, yeah, we want the world position of the player. Okay, so let's see what happens here. So it's reloading now. Okay, so that didn't work at all. And actually what I'm going to do is let's think about this a little more. Actually, what we're going to do is we're just going to play around with this a little bit. See what happens. Okay, now we got the player there. That's almost correct. Right, let's see what happens if we move. Oh, it's moving in the wrong y direction, x direction. Swear that. So right now we're basically just trying to guess, but we want to move the camera. Okay. So it's moving, except it's moving ahead of the player too far. So you're kind of doing the right thing. We're just off. So let's think about it. We'll figure this out. So we got the offset. Ah, okay. So the minus is actually not what I thought it was. So it basically was saying that it was basically doing the negative of this. Let me think. So I'm going to actually move this over here so you guys see what I'm looking at. So so we already have a bunch of lerp here, which we'll get to in a second. But basically, we were in here. We were already animating kind of. We're not following the player one by one. We're basically just. And thank you, Donna Bucht. Thank you very much. That makes me happy, especially now in these moments where we're taking time to figure things out. Let's think about this a little bit. So basically, like, we have the position of the player, So we create a position from that. So let's actually go step by step and understand this a little bit. So, right, let's move this next to each other. Okay, so what we do is we take the position of the player, and this does not do anything yet. So we got the position, right? And then the minus adds the opposite of the position we give it, right? So we give it a position, a new position. So final, let's call that center screen or something like that. Is basically an offset. We're gonna make it, and it has that in it. Okay, and then what we do with that, then we basically add that to the position that we have, right? And adding is basically the same as translating, if I'm not correct, right? If I'm not mistaken. So translating basically adds these values. So actually what we're going to do is we're going to not even use this. We're just going to do this by hand to understand better what we're actually doing. So the moved one is basically the offset dx, and then we're going to do the minus center screen, right? Because it's minus. So, and then minus, it's going to be dx, and then it's going to be dy minus, and so we're going to have to say pause dot. And once we got this working, we can change this back to use some of these methods. But I want to kind of understand exactly what we're doing here. Center screen dot dy. Right? Okay. So we got the moved one now. Okay, and now see the problem that we had. So now basically we need to still derive the dx is basically the original position of the player. No, let's see, it's a center screen actually. Minus basically like how far do we have to move the camera, right? And then the dy is the same for the y, right? And then basically we say that the camera is basically adding the the dx and dy. So we're translating the camera by dx and dy. Okay. And we're not using the moved at all, so that's not good. We actually yeah, it needs to be the moved one, not the center screen. Okay. So okay, and now basically when we render this, right? When we render this, we're actually going to do something like this. We're going to translate the camera, the canvas, by minus camera dx and minus camera dy. So that's what I had earlier. So that's what worked. So I'm going to see if I can get this working again. So I did a restart. Where's my run window here? I'm a little bit confused by this not showing it. So actually, like, since this is taking so long to refresh and everything, for now we're going to stop this one, and we're going to use the I'm going to stop screen as SCR copy, and we're going to actually just use the Mac version because it's so much faster to update. So that's like a huge improvement, right? Over the previous way of how to develop Flutter. I mean, it's still fast, but I guess with the SCR screen copy and everything, it makes it slow. And the main important thing for now is that you guys see that, and girls, what we're doing here, what the results are, and so on. right? So here you see we did this, and we're doing this the same way. So now we just have to figure out this method here, the camera follow. Oh, the other thing is, okay, so I made a mistake, obviously, because the camera right now is probably crashing because the camera is null. Where did my... Okay, there you go, right? So first of all, when we start the game, we need to set the camera to offset empty. Or 0, 0, right? Okay. All right, so now, oh, it doesn't like that. Okay, so now it should be in a better state. Okay, cool. So now we have the player in the center. So we did something right, okay? And now we move it. Okay, so now we got what we wanted, right? Okay, cool. So now we're basically following the player. And now we can start looking at the code and try to understand this a little more. So we take the position of the player, right? Then we find where is the center of the screen, right? And then we're basically saying that we need to move... We basically need to create we need to move the cameras to where it basically centers itself exactly where the player is, right? So basically the center of the screen without following the player would be this, right? So it's kind of, it's a medium width and medium height. So it would be exactly there regardless of where the player is. So of the whole canvas, right? If you take the whole canvas, right, it would be maybe here, okay? Then we say, we take the player position, which in this case is here, right? And we subtract the center screen, which is this. So in this case, it would be a positive x, right? Because the player is to the right. And we do the same for the y. So I should think about the x to keep this simple. And then we'll say, okay, the camera, where's the camera currently, right? And so we figure out like what's the delta that we need to move the canvas, right, to fix where the camera currently is. And then we basically translate the camera the x dy. But then since our origin is down here, right, then when we render it, we apply minus. What we could probably do is we could probably do this beforehand and then lower left out. Okay, well, we still have to do minus dx, right? Probably more confusing, but if you do it before, okay, so that didn't work at all. Then maybe you don't have to do dx. Okay, let's see. Let's see. All right. Okay, so yeah, that's very confusing. Let's just keep it the way we had it, because basically we wanna do everything with the lower left, right, lower left canvas. Okay, so now comes the fun part. So basically right now, let's refresh this to get to a happy state again. So now we're moving player, everything is happy, camera is following, right? We cannot leave. If we're really fast, we can. Also, there's one thing that I want to fix. You see like how the player is kind of bouncing off before it actually hits it, so we have to fix that as well. But we'll take care of that afterwards. So we did the camera follow, and now basically I want it to follow a little bit slower. So there's a trick you can do. So basically you define a lerp, right? You define a lerp, and the lerp basically says, how fast do I want to follow it? Like how much of a delay do I want to, how much do I want to lag behind the player? And then for that though, you need to know how much time actually passed, right? How much since the last game loop. So let's call it dt. And then we'll put that in here. And now we basically have almost the exact method that we had before. And now we just need to pass it in here. All right, so now let's refresh. What happened now? Okay. Okay, yes, we need to, this needs to be in parentheses. Wait. Because we're basically doing the dx, and we're already basically making the dx smaller for now. So basically, like instead of following one-on-one, we are kind of purposely lagging mad. So why is this not working? Okay. Huh. Very interesting. Okay, so let's remove this for now, and let's make sure this works, and then we actually check it in. We should have done that. So we are following the player now. So let's do a actually a commit with that. Game. Let's put that more to the top so everyone can see that better. Game. Camera. Following player. Okay. And okay, so now we're following the player. We can see that we're missing grid lines here even, so I guess we haven't like, so that's kind of odd. So I guess once we, because the grid lines get rendered now, so probably well, yeah, so probably the grid lines we should render before we before we move the camera, so we actually have the grid lines. So that looks kind of funky. So now I can actually see, okay, this is actually cool. I like this. So now we can actually, we're going to keep this, obviously we're not going to keep this forever like this, but now you can actually see how how it's actually the canvas that's moving and not the, like that's how we basically keep centered, right? So basically we're moving the camera and then we draw everything, right? It's not that we actually like, there's not a real camera. It's just basically that we draw everything relative to the player now, to the center of the player, right? And so that way, the player stays in the center. So that's kind of cool. I just would like to be able to get the alert back in. So let's think about this a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use debugging here, right, to see like how our things get affected and why they are. See what was wrong when we started using the lerp. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this it's a little smaller. We don't really need this anymore, so I'll move this out, and then we'll put the debug window over here. Okay, so there's something that's not cool. Put that here so we can kind of see what we're logging there. Move that over here, and so now we have a little more space. So what's going on here? Width was called on null. Okay, so what? Size or width. Okay, so basically we have to say if size null, then basically we just return. We can't do anything. If we don't know the size of the canvas yet, and that's usually during game startup, right? Then we can't really do anything. Okay, so we can see that dx is 0. So let's just say what we do is like if dx is not 0 or dy is not 0, then we print. Otherwise we get a bunch of zeros printed. Alright, so let's do that again. It's still printing. Okay, so now it's not printing. So now we see that we moved the camera one time. We moved it to the left here to center the player, right? So now if we move this, we can say that dx is always 1 because we're moving to the right here, right? So what we'll do is I'm going to only apply the lerp for now to the x-axis. So we have to do, so if you do just dt, let's just do that, right? So now let's see. Okay, so that's a problem already. What in the world? Why is this none? What's going on here? What in the world? Why is this none? Oh, because this is a timestamp. This is DT. This is correct. I have no idea why. We'll figure this out. So I guess we won't get to the HUD. We'll do that next. Or we'll just what we also could do, we could just say, okay, let's leave it like this for now, with the camera moving directly with the player, and prove it later, if I can't figure this out within a certain amount of time. So I don't understand why. I mean, unless DT is really, really small, and there's some rounding error or something weird like that. So basically here we're figuring out where should we move to, right? So let's print that out. Let's put a let's only print it when something changed, right? Otherwise, we'll just Flutter console. So what we'll do is we'll just not apply DT yet. And we're trying to understand a little better. Why is this? Okay. So now we get the move. That's the offset here. Well, actually, we don't know which one's which. So let's do that. And did we have another debug print? Yeah. Okay. So that was the offset. Okay. So we have a moved and we have a DX. Okay. Fine. So it's actually. So yeah, at first like the camera is 0, right? So the X is exactly moved the X. Now if we move this just a little bit, okay. Now we can see what's happening here. So let's just go up here. So we had the X moved was 6.7 minus, and then basically the X becomes a difference like. Right, because it becomes a difference from where the camera currently is to where it needs to be, right? So, right, we're basically calculating the difference between where we want to be and where the camera currently is. So that's fine. So basically, what we could also do, right, we could basically say, if we don't want to animate this, we could just say the camera is basically moved where we want to be. Should have the same result. So we'll make sure that this actually works. All right. So you can see that has the exact result. The only thing is we don't want to move there yet, right? We want to kind of slow the movement down a little bit. We kind of want to trail behind the player a little bit. So that's why we're trying to say, well, okay, we get the DX, and then we multiply it by something. Let's just say we multiply by just 0.7 all the time, right? So we're always a little bit behind the player until we catch up. So let's try that. So now, okay, now we kind of see if we really fast. So it needs to be actually smaller. So we'll play around with this. So I'll move this for now. So if I make this a really small number, I think that's where maybe we start getting problems too. So, okay, now I can see I can actually move a little bit outside. I'm not following exactly, right? The player can move a little bit faster. Okay, so that's cool. So we got that figured out. Now what I want to make sure is so the lerp, let's just do that. So and then we'll print the lerp. Okay, so and then we'll so for now we actually want, so let's just get rid of the moved here, and we've kind of figured out that works correctly. And let's see, so the lerp is 41, right? Now obviously that's way too big, so that would mean we would So we can never have a lerp larger than 1. And I think that might have been the problem that we were running. Because now if I move, well, we are not applying the lerp, but if we were, we would basically move too far. Like we want to, it needs to be smaller than 1. So somehow this number here is not really helping. So let's just try this. Okay, and so yes, so basically now we're getting a little different numbers here. And so now if we apply that lerp, actually would probably have to be even smaller. So let's try that now. Okay, so now you can see it's working again. Right? The thing is that we're still too fast. Right? We're still following the player too fast. And then what you also have to do here, you have to make sure that it's never larger than 1. Right? So let's do that. I mean, we could. So we always. Oh, the min. Sorry. Right? Min. Let's. Okay, fine. Don't have to show in math. So now we're getting small lerps here. And now we can kind of see we can almost fly out of the. So now the game feels a little smoother, right? Because the camera doesn't just follow one-on-one all the time, right? So and I kind of like this effect with the with the thing moving, right? It's kind of a cool effect. We might think of using that for something. Okay, so now we get the lerp like this, and now basically what we can do, we can mess with this factor here. Like if we make this really small, right? It will basically be way too slow following. See, now it's following way too slow. So the player flies out of it, and the camera can't keep up. But eventually it will catch up with the player. Just it's way too slow, right? So we can find a nice little value here. We might want to make this a property of the game props, but for now we leave it here because it's clearly just for the camera. So this works fine. This is right. If the camera becomes too annoyingly slow, also we have to think about that we are on a Mac. So if we make this like really slow, yeah, on the phone it's annoying, right? You keep flying out of your space. So let me just make it 0.025. Okay, so yeah, so that works kind of nicely. We can we can make the camera more sticky if we want to later. So okay, so now we got a lerp, and now we have also a better understanding how this worked, right? So at this point we can check this in, and you know what we can do actually? We can just amend this because it wasn't that great before anyways. We don't want to keep that other code. I just committed that for safety in case we get totally confused. Okay. Now the other thing I wanted to point out is that the player is hitting the walls. You can see that now actually, boom, right? It hit it before it actually hit it. So that looks kind of stupid. So what we want to do is when we actually look for collisions, right? So here we have the colliders, and when the player basically the hit when it does the hit points, right? We need to basically we need different hit tiles. The player is considered too big. So what we'll do, we'll go to the player. And we'll look again how this works in here. So the update, where are we looking for this? Move, right? I think, oh, check wall collision, right? So check wall collision. So basically what you're doing is we're saying that get the hit tiles for the tile size, right? And that's too large. So what we actually need, I don't know if we use the tile size anywhere else but here. So let's see. Yeah, see, there you go. So the the thrust sprite we can keep like that. Actually, while we're here, I wanted to actually increase, make the height of the thrust a little larger. Maybe even a little more, like let's say. Yeah, that looks nicer, right? So now we have a nicer thrust. Also, the thrust is kind of really not greatly positioned. I think it has to do now where I changed the height. It's centered around the it's using the player width to centers, but actually it would need to actually leave that alone for now. It looked okay. So what we need to do actually is when we get the player, we need to get the hit size, right? Because the tile size is too big for that. We need to actually get a specific hit size for the player. Okay, and so what we'll do when we do check for the collision, right? We actually use the hit size, and then we should be fine. Okay, so now obviously we need to pass this in, and now basically we have the tile size, and so we can say that the player size is a factor of the tile size, which it will always be. So we say it's basically the tile size times, let's say 0.8, like 80%. It's filling the tile 80%, right? So now we can pass this in here. Okay, now let's see. Now let's see if we hit the walls a little better. Okay, now that looks already, yeah, that looks better, right? What I want to do though is I want to be able to render this. I want to be able to say, did I do this correctly? I want to visually see it without having to hit walls to try this out. So basically what we want to do is, first of all, we add to game props. We're saying, we're going to say debug static const. Actually, it's going to be a getter. Bool get debug player hit tile, and for now we return true. And then what we want is we need to have and I'm going to steal this from here. We need to have a way to to paint this. So we need to paint for that. So actually, let's make this hit debug hit point paint. This is debug hit tile paint. Now I don't like this actually here, because this I want to keep this clean of Flutter. So what we'll do is we'll just add this to the player. And one thing I want to do later is actually want to separate out the I want to separate out the controller code from the. Okay, so this is actually still .ui, so it would be fine either way. But I want to separate the controller code from the renderer code. But we'll do that later. So basically, now what we'll do is if so when we render the player, right? We say render debug hit tile, right? And so then we'll give it the player model, and so what we then do, we'll basically rendering kind of like this, but except it's going to be erect. So we say canvas dot render. Okay. render rect. Okay, so it's not. Oh, we need the canvas. Yeah, that's of course the problem. Let's move to a different line here. Dot render draw image draw rect, right? And so the rect would be, so let's figure the rect out first. Oh, actually, what we want to do is we don't want to draw a rect. We want to actually create the hit tile of the player, and we want to render little points. And so right, we want to basically hit render a point here, a point here, a point here, a point here. Maybe not. Maybe it's nicer to actually have. Yeah. So let's do it that way. So final rect equals rect dot from. Okay. So what we have? We have the player dot tile position dot work position, right? We create an. So that's the x, right? And now let's store that in a variable. Okay, and then we do that, and then y, and then we have the size, right? The player size. Okay, hold on. Where did the size go? Hit size. Okay, we call it hit size. Fine. Hit size. Dot width. Okay, so it's already double. So it's twice the hit size, right? And then we basically say canvas dot draw and rect at this rect, and then we give it the paint debug. What's it called? Okay. Debug hit tile paint. Okay, so the navigation here is not like it is. I'm still used to like Vim, but for some things, IntelliJ is just better, so I'm using that. Okay, so now basically we say, and then we say if. Okay, now we have game props in here. Okay, it's fine. I'm going to access game props in here. This is just for debugging purposes, so it's probably fine. Need to import this first. Dot debug player hit tile, right? If you don't want to do that, we just return, right? And then here we basically say this dot debug render hit tile, right? Debug hit tile canvas and the player. All right, we don't need to do this. So this should be fine. So let's see now. Okay, so we said it's true. I should have rendered it. It doesn't look like. Oh, it drew it up here. Okay, so first of all, we don't want it to fill things, so it has to be the stroke, and then we want it to be stroke width is equal to, let's say, 2.0. Okay. So the thing is, why I drew it up there is because we already had, when we draw the player, right, we already have navigated the canvas to where the player is. So we are doing this translation twice. So basically all we really need to do then is it needs to be a 0, 0. Pretty sure. But we'll figure this out. Okay, so that's what I thought. So it's almost a 0, 0, but it's now, we know we are centered. So we need to subtract the tile size, and then it will work. Okay, well, divide by 2. So let's store that in a variable. Okay, so that's interesting, right? I'm running out of time here, so we'll probably have to call this quits in a second. So it's basically minus radius and then radius. Oh, but yeah, I mean, that doesn't make sense, right? Because we're trying to center it around the hit size. So it's going to be minus the hit size, right? Right? We want to, that's why it's a little bit off. Yeah. So that makes perfect sense, right? Because we're trying to move this just so it's centered around. Divide by 2 again. So, okay, let's do this. Now the radius equals this divided by 2. Okay, fine. Now we're happy. And I'm calling this radius because I'm always thinking of a circle, right? Especially since we're running everything centered. So now we have that, right? So now we can see if our hit size is basically what we want it to be, right? And then we can kind of see how we're hitting things and so on. And to me, it seems perfect. It's a little big. So let's just actually make this a stroke with 1 so we can better see this, right? Or the other cool thing, so I want to show like the cool thing with Flutter. So I did a hard restart. You can also just do a hard reload. So I'm going to actually change this to be smaller. And you're going to see that I'm going to refresh it. You're going to see this changing, but it's not even going to, the player will keep moving where it was. So it should have actually done that now. Oh, well, maybe it doesn't work for this thing that is actually defined statically. So yeah, now we have a smaller, right. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to play with these game props. And I think the hit size is a little bit off. It needs to be actually, oops. It needs to actually be a little bit smaller. So let's do a 0.7. So refresh there. Okay, now that looks, okay, now it's a little bit, now the player can, let's do 7.5. Right, and so you can easily see like how this helps to be able to debug this. So you can see exactly how you would hit the wall and so on. So okay, this is, I mean the thing is that the hit size is still considered, like we're making our lives easier by making the hit area a rectangle even though the player is round. But it's good enough, right? So let's, I'm gonna tag this. Check this in, tag this in, then we'll have a break. Okay. So player debugging and tweaking hit size. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tag this. Git tag. What do I have? Git tag Ep12 end. And then okay. And so in the next, so if you stick around in the next, thank you very much, John Vogt. I will keep doing this until we have a working game. We have a working game now, kind of, but we'll keep making it better. So thanks for that. Always happy to hear. So we got we fixed the hit size. We got the camera working. I thought that would be actually quicker. And in the next episode, we will do actually, we'll put a HUD over the, over the phone or whichever one up here. We're going to put a little HUD that shows us the health of the player. And later on, it will also show us how much ammo he has once we add shooting capabilities. So for now, I'll stop. I'll be back in around 5 minutes. So it would be roughly 8:05 or wherever you are, X hour 05. All right. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in a second.